Hey everybody, a few quick announcements before we kick off this week's episode. First, Digging for Kryptonite is going to take a short end of summer break. The podcast will be on hiatus for the rest of the month of August. We'll be back with brand new episodes in early September, right after Labor Day. And coming up over the fall and early winter, we have some big events, exciting interviews, and fun standalone episodes coming your way. So I hope that you keep tuning in and that you enjoy. And in the meantime, while we're off for these next couple of weeks, please take the opportunity to catch up on any episodes that you might have missed, explore our Patreon content, and check out our sister podcast series, Another Exciting Episode in the Adventures of Superman. So that's announcement number one. Number two, I am excited to share that we finally have merch. By popular demand, I have set up the Digging for Kryptonite TeePublic storefront. The link is in the show notes. You can now get your Digging for Kryptonite branded t-shirts, hats, mugs, and pins, with potentially more to come down the line, but that's what we're going to start with. So it's really exciting to finally be able to offer this. And for those of you who end up ordering anything, thank you in advance. And please feel free to take pictures and send them in because it'd be awesome to see. Finally, I mentioned this in an earlier episode, but I'm going to be attending New York Comic Con this October for the first time in a good number of years. I'm really excited. And my hope is to organize some sort of Digging for Kryptonite meetup on the convention floor, even if it's just a few minutes for us to get together and chat and take a photo or something like that. I'm going to be putting up a poll in our Digging for Kryptonite Facebook group to try to get a sense of which day would work for the largest number of our Digging for Kryptonite community. So please make sure that you vote in that poll. If you're not a member of the group, please head on over to Facebook and join us. And I'm really looking forward to New York Comic Con this October and hopefully connecting with you guys there. All right, those are the announcements. With all that being said, I hope you enjoy this week's episode on Lois Lane and 10 times she gained superpowers. Enjoy. Attention horror fans. Colleen, A Vlada Tale of the Damned is the forthcoming comic book sequel to Vlada, A Dracula Tale, a gender-swapped spin on the world of Dracula, featuring an original story by Chris Denmead and art by Matt Slay and Tim Vigil. The Kickstarter campaign for this 28-page comic launches on August 15th. Visit Colleen, A Vlada Tale of the Damned on Kickstarter and sign up now to be notified on launch. Check out the Vlada, A Dracula Tale Facebook page for more. As a Superman fan, have you ever wondered what would happen if a person who knew barely anything about comics decided to absorb hundreds of Superman stories from all eras and media? Robbo is that kind of person. And that's exactly what he's done on a new show called This Podcast Will Never Die. The first season, called Superman Will Never Die, starts with the unexpected ways the Man of Steel stood out from the pulp heroes on the newsstands in 1938. Listen and subscribe to This Podcast Will Never Die, and you'll never look at Superman's trunks the same way again. Aw Yeah Comics celebrates everything that is wonderful about comics, toys, artwork, and the joy they bring to people. Visit them in person at one of their 3 locations, Harrison, New York, Muncie, Indiana, or Skokie, Illinois, home to our pal, Sweet Sweet Bernie. If you have children and have been looking for a family-friendly store, look no further. Join Aw Yeah for exciting events, including creator signings, how-tos, and more. Visit awyeahcomics.com and follow them on social media. Their name says exactly how they feel about it. Say it with me now. Aw yeah. Fat Moose Comics, established in 1982, is New Jersey's best and oldest comic book store. Led by current owner Sean Hendricks, Moose has that rare, old-school comic shop feel and camaraderie, yet also remains a welcoming space for new fans. If you're looking for something and they don't have it, they can probably get it for you. They know a guy. Visit Fat Moose in Whippany the next time you are in the Garden State, and be sure to reach out via the Fat Moose Comics Facebook page. Welcome to Digging for Kryptonite, a Superman fan journey. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. This week, we're digging into 10 times Lois Lane gained superpowers across time and media. In the second half of the episode, I'll welcome first-time guest Chris MacKenzie as we survey a selection of pre-crisis classics, modern comics, and television episodes featuring a superpowered Lois. But first, we're starting with the most recent, joining me in studio to discuss The Rise of the Superwoman arc by Josh Williamson and Dan Mora is a pair of guests. To my left, from All Yeah Comics Skokie, sweet, Bernie Gersmeyer. Welcome back.
What's up, baby?
And to my right, real-life Lobo cosplayer, Justin DeVoe. Welcome.
I feel like we just did this.
I'm excited to compare notes because when you guys were here about a year ago for House of Brainiac, did you guys come in hot? And I was expecting it from DeVoe. I knew
Oh my God.
He had a lot to get off of his chest with respect to Lobo and the retcons to Zarnian continuity. But I was not prepared for Sweet. Sweet was not that sweet.
No, I was sour.
For the record, once again, I really enjoyed House of Brainiac, and I would still love to have Josh Williamson come on the podcast. But I take it we feel a little differently about Rise of the Superwoman.
Oh, if Josh was listening, like I couldn't even stop but like text you guys and be like, dude, it's going to be a love fest because I love this whole arc. I love the art. Dan Moore is amazing. Josh is killing it. Like everything to me is firing on full cylinders now going into this next event.
Actually, that might be the first time you ever messaged us beforehand to be like, I love this. I can't wait to talk about this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was a big fan as well. So this ran across the Superman title by Williamson and Mora, issues 19 through 23. There was also the Superwoman special, all collected in the Rise of the Superwoman trade paperback. And before we get into that specifically, let me just ask you, generally speaking, and this points to our overall episode here. I mean, how do you guys feel about just the notion of Lois having superpowers? Is that an idea that resonates with you? You can kind of take it or leave it. Like, how do you feel about that?
I love it, actually. It comes with baggage. It comes with her dealing with, I mean, the nice thing that Perry is mayor now, like it leaves a spot for her to be editor-in-chief, but like you're seeing it be hard. Like with Clark, he was just a reporter. It's not to say just a reporter, but he could sneak out. Like she's the editor. Like she can't,
it's a little harder.
Chief can't just stop being a chief. But I just think the camaraderie now between like the different layer it adds to their marriage, I dig it. Like I think there's just a lot of really cool banter and stuff that they can now do or talk about now that she understands what it feels like.
Yeah.
See, I like the run. I don't like when she has superpowers, man. I don't. I like the fact that she acts as brave without them.
Oh, cool.
Like she doesn't give a damn. Like she'll face down parasites. She doesn't care. I think when you give her superpowers, she reacts exactly how we thought she would. She's like, well, I can either go out with Power Girl and them, or I can fly around. I think that's great. I also think that cheapens the fact that she's a superhero without them. Shouldn't care about. She's brave. She's bold. She doesn't need superpowers, even in the face of certain danger. And it's not even like I know Superman's going to save me. She does what she does because it's her job.
Yeah.
So I don't mind that it happened, especially because of the whole Atom switch with people changing powers. That it's probably Zod's power that she has, or at least that's what's intimated at the end. But I don't need it. And I didn't mind it. I like the run, especially with Timekeeper or Timekeeper, whatever.
Time Trap.
But I can do without it.
And I like the fact that it seemed finite. Like I'd be more
I'd
be more worried. Like if it was like she has superpowers now for good. I was like, no.
Well, right in the beginning, Ray Palmer's like, these aren't going to I'm just letting you know that right now. And you can burn.
Yeah.
So he's like, freeze breath is okay. No eye lasers. He's like, you're going to burn through these pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Right. So the whole notion is that her cells are charged, but it's unclear whether or not they can be recharged. So the notion is that she's using these powers and it might be this finite supply. And that proves to be the case if we really jump ahead to issue 25 past what we looked at for this, but she does expend her powers and is left powerless. I got to tell you.
And that's where my Lois comes in. She's like, I don't care. I have to get this done.
Yep.
If they fade, they fade, but I know I have to do this. And I was like, see that? I'm okay with that as a bookend, because she wasn't like, oh, they're going to run out. Now I'm going to play it safe. She's like, no, I'm going to see this all the way through, which I was like, that's Lois right there.
I'll tell you, like, even Lois with powers, we saw Lois Lane. Like, there were a lot of, like, when she's talking to the Aftermath and says, like, no, there. Now I know. Now I got your tell. Like, I saw Lois be Lois even with powers, and that's why I kind of dug it. Like, that's I was like, okay, it wasn't just about powers. She was Lois with powers.
Yeah, an investigative journalist.
It was awesome.
And had the power.
That's why, again, I was like loving all over this.
Yeah, I mean, that was my favorite aspect when you saw the journalist side of her
Yeah.
kind of side by side with the superhero. To answer the question, and maybe to kind of split the difference between you guys, I like it for a discrete period of time to allow her to experience what it is Superman goes through. And there are other instances we're going to talk about in the other segment that really speak to that, and other instances where she has powers and Clark doesn't, and that's a very different dynamic. Here, obviously, they're side by side. So I like it for a discrete period of time. I'm glad that this ran the amount that it did. I don't need this to be her thing all the time because, like to your point, DeVoe, she has her thing. Yeah. Right? So we don't need that, but it's fun to explore. Now, I did not read any of Absolute Power, though I kind of skimmed through it. But my understanding is the first time we see her as Superwoman is in these pages, correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's not set up in Absolute Power, as much as I know powers are stolen and then they're returned and some are kind of mixed up.
Given to other people.
Right.
Yeah.
And
it kind of just happens. Ultimately, then it's clear that Lois gets powers from Zod. But
Zod, yeah.
But Zod doesn't understand why his powers are gone.
I got to say, the notion of there being a ticking clock on Lois's powers, I felt right at home because that was... Wait, why do you say yeah?
Oh, no, I'm happy you feel that way.
No, because I'm like, he can't know where I'm going with this, but he's in strong agreement.
Maybe.
But as a Power Rangers fan,
oh, God.
That was a big part of Tommy Oliver's arc during the Mighty Morphin era, where he was the Green Ranger. He lost the powers, he came back, but it was a short supply. And so there was a ticking clock on it. Every time he morphed and went into battle, this might be the last time. So it very much reminded me of that.
Well, that's cool.
So that was kind of fun. But hand in hand with all of the Lois as Superwoman business, we also get a very unexpected callback to Superman Doomsday Hunter Prey.
Yes, with Radiant.
Probably doesn't mean as much to DeVoe, but I know, Bernie, you must have been there for that.
I was happy as a clam. It was the 90s. The 90s live again.
Yeah. I mean, we did a whole episode on a number of those Doomsday stories, including Hunter Prey, so people can go check that out. But essentially, yes, one of the planets that Doomsday had attacked that ultimately stopped him was this planet Calaton and the being Radiant.
Yeah.
And then we have a return of Radiant in this story, and also this business with the aftermath.
Yeah,
you
so
mentioned
cool.
them earlier.
It's such a great idea.
I was like, because they're all wearing like I was like,
they all look
what
like the Doomsday
and
garb.
they all come from different places. And when you actually find out what they are, I'm like, that's killer.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
Right, because that garb, and that's the containment suit that you saw Doomsday in at the very beginning of the death of Superman. That's that planet's funeral garb. So when they defeated Doomsday, that's what they put him in and shot him to Earth. But now you find out in this storyline that the survivors of that world, and I guess other worlds as well, they've banded together to form the Aftermath.
Yeah.
And they don that funeral garb themselves. They call themselves the Aftermath. So on top of all of the fun Lois as Superwoman stuff, the Doomsday side of it I thought was fascinating. And to actually get, because it's funny, as many times as Doomsday has popped back up over the years, I mean, Hunter Prey is not something that I can recall being like directly referenced, certainly not to this extent. So I was thrilled.
I loved it. Yeah. And we've gone back and forth about dude, we like that Doomsday had an origin or a backstory. We've talked about that, and I loved it, and I was really happy to see it back because I think there should be something behind this machine that kills. Yeah. And it's a really, really cool story.
So this Rise of the Superwoman arc, essentially I would say three major pieces to it. There's the initial couple of issues where Superman and Superwoman team up to fight Atomic Skull.
Right.
And then we get the subsequent attack by Doomsday and the arrival of Time Trapper. We'll talk about that. Then sort of this interlude issue where they have their date. And then the final two issues where the Aftermath arrives and declares war on Earth for harboring Doomsday. So the beginning piece of it with especially that Doomsday attack and the arrival of Time Trapper, I'm certainly not an expert when it comes to the Legion or Time Trapper, but the notion that the Time Trapper can be different people, I know it from Final Crisis Legion of Three Worlds, where Superboy Prime in the future was a Time Trapper. Yes. And I went through that not too long ago, so that was kind of fresh in my mind. I think that kind of primed me for being open to Doomsday being underneath that cloak. And this idea being that, as we know, every time Doomsday dies, he evolves. He can't be killed the same way. And so the Time Trapper version of Doomsday has come to Superman. He stops this battle, freezes time with present day Doomsday, and essentially says that he wants Superman to kill him so that he can die and be reborn as a god. Like that's the only level that remains for him. And of course, Superman refuses, but I just thought it was a cool
but
cool
he
setup.
refuses and he stops time and then asks Lois to do it. And it ends with her crying. And I was like, is she about to do this? And then, of course, the next issue, she's like, no, I'm crying because you're going to make Superman do what he never wants to do, and that's take a life. But when he stops time, he's like, fine, you're not going to do it. You got to.
You might.
I was like, oh my god,
because you're gonna watch everybody.
Yeah.
He's gonna watch everybody.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So when we get to the climax of the story, he returns and makes that same offer to Lois. So there is a bit there when Doomsday, Time Trapper Doomsday, is talking to Lois about how the last thing he remembered hearing,
the best,
when Superman and Doomsday fought to the death, was Lois's crying.
Yeah.
And Lois has this bit, I think to your point, where she's like, yes, I was crying because he died, but it wasn't just that. It was because you had pushed Superman to do the one thing he'll never do, which is kill. You like that?
Yeah, I like that a lot, actually.
Yeah, I love that.
Because I think that's a missing piece. I think everybody thinks when you think Superman Doomsday, he had to take down Doomsday because he wasn't going to stop. But you forget that he hasn't killed anybody since that exile way back in the late 80s, that he sent himself on exile for that very purpose. And he promised he would never do it again.
Yeah.
So we don't really talk about the fact that he did it again. And I love that she brought it up.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I guess in my mind, in my mind, it's like,
he's
but
like,
she was
nope,
crying
you're wrong.
because he was dead. But no,
no, he's right. Like, come on, that's why you were crying. Like that cover is iconic. That picture is iconic.
Yeah, so there is a part of me that's like, no, she was crying because he died. But in fairness to Josh, and I'm sure he probably went back, or at least he remembers it, right?
I don't know, did he?
In Superman 75, because we talked about
we
this.
Said specifically this,
because there's a moment where I think Superman's unleashing his heat vision, and Lois says to him in Superman 75, she's like, Doomsday wants to kill, and you can't. And I remember saying to you at the time, I was like this guy's fighting for his life here, leave him alone. But
let him stop talking to him.
But I think that, Williamson is probably pulling from that kind of moment, because that idea of him being pushed over his line was there even in the original material. So it does track.
Listen, we've said this, like, if you look at Williamson's age, look at every single book he's releasing, like G.I. Joe.
Yeah.
All that, like all that Energon stuff he's working on too. So he's clearly like in the generation of the mid to late 80s into the 90s. He loves this era.
And he's talented enough that they're letting him paint with a very
here's
broad
the keys of the kingdom, man.
Yeah.
Go. Yeah.
The one part I texted you about this. I was like, okay, I'm late to the Superman show. Everybody knows that. I've been catching up through this show and from what you guys recommend. And I was like, and in my notes I put like, just send him to the Phantom Zone. Like, I understand he broke out of hell. Now wait a minute. But I asked because I don't know, and I love not knowing. I asked, I was like, have they tried? Why can't they just do that? And I know a lot of times the Phantoms are, we know how to make ourselves corporeal, and like they change the rules all the time. But I'm like, isn't that the best way to get rid of this thing? Just fire him in there and wait till something. Instead, Lex does what they don't want him to do, which is shrink. Like everybody, are like, don't do that. He said, what was I supposed to do?
I like how Superman started. He almost started lecturing Lex, and Lex is like, no. What? None of you had an idea?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, jumping all the way to the end of the story.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Look, I'm here, which means that's what we're going to do.
But yes, the ultimate resolution to this, because at this point in the story, the Aftermath has attacked, and there's this big battle between Radiant and Doomsday and our super family. And Lex's solution is to shrink and bottle the Aftermath army and Doomsday. And I was very much with Lex there. It's not like Superman had another solution. Yeah. So it's
like, what do you got, buddy?
Yeah. But I did like that bit where they talk about how time is slowed. Someone brings forth the notion of like, well, what would happen if Doomsday died and returned under those conditions? What power over time would that give him?
How many times would he die?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But kind of pointing towards his eventual future as the Time Trapper, which on that note too, look, we've talked about this a lot. I feel like it's kind of law of diminishing returns with Doomsday, where can only kind of get so much out of him every time you bring him back. But I like the Time Trapper angle. I just thought it was cool.
Yeah. I just liked it because it was different, but at the same time, I'm like, why make it the original Doomsday though? Like, I was just like, that one to me is like the killer. You let that one go, like the one that punched out of hell and the rest of that stuff. I was like, make it a version, but like, why did it have to be that version?
Well, but that's like his very far future evolved self. I was okay with that.
I don't know. I like we're talking about the evolution. Yeah. Like, I like that he's smart and very communicative, because you kind of would think that might happen eventually.
Yeah.
So in the present day, the first round against Doomsday, Superman rages out because there's all this business about how Graft and Farm, they had infected him with kryptonite, and
they are creepy as shit.
Got to keep his anger in check, and so he kind of unleashes, and they're able to stop Doomsday that first time, and then the second time, like we said, we get the bottling. But amidst all of this, as far as the Superwoman piece goes, a few things stood out to me. One was just a cute little bit when Atomic Skull attacks, right? There's this report and Lois goes into the storage room and bumps into Clark, who's there to change as well. Like, I like that.
Yeah. Like, I need more room here.
Yeah. That
Which she would be the one that like bogarts her way in because technically that's her domain.
Yeah.
Right? Like, no, you move. Like, I have to do this
I'm
now.
chief, by the way.
Yeah. Because that's her area. She's in charge in that area, which I thought was really cool that was in there so prominently.
Yeah.
Where she's like, no, one of us is going to go. I got to go first. I was like,
Again, that's
awesome.
all the layers that I love. Like, now that she's in charge, it just adds more. Like, she's still Lois Lane, but there's just more going on. Can I talk about the art real fast?
Of course.
Oh my God, Dan Moore, dude. That guy,
I mean, all right. Here's one thing about Lois, too, that I think I've always found Dan Mora, his work so good and classy. Here's why I find him even more classy. I don't think... I know there's been different interpretations of Lois. Some of them make her more, let's just say, ladylike than others. He always makes her so classy looking.
Yep.
He doesn't like boobify her out too much. And even, I noticed like even in Superwoman, like her outfit is classy. Like it's not like a new Power Girl. Yeah. It's not like.
It's not a skirt involved.
Correct. Like it just, there's something about the way
it's a Lois costume.
Yes. He just approached it in such a respectful, awesome, Lois kicks ass.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to make her the woman you think.
Absolutely top notch. And this goes all the way back to World's Finest. I think the first time we really talked about his stuff, where it's like this great blend between it has a retro feel, but also feels very modern as well. Like it's like really perfect balance.
Yes. It's not like he tries too hard to make it look like that. That's just his natural style, and it looks like that.
I'm very curious about his process. Like, I haven't had a chance to watch any YouTubes or go to a panel, but I'm so curious.
For him to do multiple books a month is really incredible.
I don't get it. Like,
and he does the bet. Like they tag him for the goods, man.
We'll talk about more instances where I think Lois as Superwoman really shined. But the one thing I really have to take her to task for, but some fallibility is good and it has a payoff. But tasking Jimmy with getting a photo of Superwoman when she knows she's not going to allow that happen. And that Supercorp is even taking steps to make sure that Lois can't be photographed. And it gets to the point where Jimmy places himself in danger.
In danger.
Yes.
And Silver Banshee is pissed off about that.
And he gets hurt.
And rightfully
he gets hurt because that's when Doomsday Time Trapper returns and freezes time and makes the pitch to Lois, and she refuses. She's confident that when he unfreezes time, she'll be able to save Jimmy from the blast. And she fails, and he's injured, and his hands, which he needs as a photographer, are injured. And Silver Banshee, she's like, you have your first arch enemy. But I was just like, why are you doing this to this poor kid?
Yeah.
Well, also, did I miss something? What did Supercorp do that they can't see? I think it's Lois, because I'm like, geez, look, it's freaking Lois.
I was just gonna say the glasses.
There's no glasses.
Is one thing, but she literally didn't do it. It's the same hair.
She's just Lois. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think generally Superwoman's not sticking around for photos, but I think there was some business about maybe when it came to security footage, news footage, stuff like that, where they're manipulating it.
Yeah, they can blur it. Yeah,
I got it.
So that they're not catching.
Because I was dying. I'm like, but she's like right there, and like, how does Silver Banshee not catch on? She's looking at her.
Right. So I think it's mostly that she's really just not sticking around. But I felt like, man, you're really setting this guy up to fail here.
Yeah, he's gonna be a mess.
But what I loved about her, and you were getting at this earlier, is when you see her strength as a journalist come through. And I feel like the two biggest instances of that, one is when she's talking to the leader of the Aftermath, who's there, and they're demanding Doomsday be turned over. I mean, that was interesting because what could the Earthlings do with Doomsday? There's a part of me where I'm like, well, send them over, send them to this guy.
Yeah.
But she keeps pressing with her questions, right? And it gets to the point where the leader says something to the effect of like, we'll find a use for him.
Yeah.
And she's like,
yeah.
Right. And it's never
that's specifically vague
articulated what that would be. But I don't know. They've lost their worlds. Are they going to try to take over others? Like, you don't know, but it definitely doesn't seem positive. But I liked how her questioning kind of led her to that.
Like, if Earth can't control Doomsday, who says they can?
Right.
Like,
also, Superman puts a lot of faith in her longevity of her powers.
Yeah.
Because at one point he's like, hold them off, and he does the fly around the world super punch.
Yes.
But I'm like, you're leaving her
with him.
Yeah. And yes, I understand you're moving really fast, but that's putting a lot of faith in the fact that her powers could have turned off.
No, and she got jacked up pretty good.
But then the other thing, when Lois is talking to Time Trapper Doomsday, right, and realizes like, oh no, you need us.
Yeah.
Right. You could go to anyone, any point in time, but you've come here. And then also that interlude issue when Superman takes Lois on that date and they're on the moon and then they go to that alien world. And there's that civil war that she's able to broker a truce. Yeah. And that notion of like, I learned interviewing all these world leaders, like once you get people talking, what, you're not a fan?
That's the part I didn't like.
Oh, I like that
part. I texted
part.
you about that. They stopped the war by being like, stop that. And everyone's like, okay. I was like, that was the corniest shit I've ever seen.
I liked it.
That's what they did.
I know. I'm like,
She's
for
like, hey,
once, it worked.
Call a truce. You stop that. And everyone's like, okay. I'm like, guy, really? Did you have to put that in there?
Well, one side needed medicine and they worked out a deal.
Wasn't it Amethyst and the other one? Nobody cared about that anyway. I was happy it was done.
No,
it was just a weird.
Here's the thing. If it had just been, stop, and they stopped, but the notion that, no, they actually worked out a deal, but they needed Lois to get them talking to get to that point where they could even entertain terms.
And I like that because that's what Lois would do.
Yes.
But when I was reading
it wasn't as clear.
I immediately texted you afterwards. I was like, did all she say is stop?
It wasn't. It wasn't as clear.
And you know what? It should have been. If you're going to have Lois with superpowers, but you're also going to make her very Lois-esque, there had to be, like, listen, this is what we're going to do. You guys, we're going to talk. And like, there should have been more. Instead, they yelled it and then explained it post-fight.
And all they needed was like the a la Mark Waid narration box where like it's Superman symbol just says, and all it took was 30 minutes with my wife.
That solves
it's done.
Everything.
Like it's done.
And she proves that she's more than just Superwoman because she didn't even use the power. She used just her and solved it. That I would have been okay with. But it was a yell and then an explanation. I was like, that was...
All right, fair enough. I did like their date though on the moon.
The date was
and playing darts.
Yeah, with the boulder with like pieces of the moon. Not even a boulder. Like I'm going to pick up part of the moon. Yeah,
it was cool. You know, it's one of those things. Other instances that we're going to look at, especially Lois and Clark and Smallville.
Yeah,
I think those are instances where Lois getting powers allows more to come to light as far as their dynamic because it does allow for her to learn something about what Clark's day to day is like. Yeah. This isn't really that, but it's still fun in its own way. It just, I don't think it serves kind of as deep a purpose, but it's still a lot of fun.
And when you know, like we walked into it and the characters walked into it knowing it's finite.
All right. Well, thank you both. It's always a blast. And everybody make sure you stay tuned. Right after this break, I'll be joined by Chris and we'll look at 9 other times Lois Lane gained superpowers. We'll be right back.
Has it been 9?
It's been a lot more than that, but for purposes of this episode, we boiled it down to 10 total, including this one.
He's going to edit the heck out of that.
I was fascinated.
My love of the TV series Smallville is well documented, and there's one rewatch podcast that's always at the top of my queue. Always Hold On to Smallville, hosted by our pal, Zach Moore. Zach and his guests bring great insight, passion, and humor to each and every episode. And the podcast continues with more great Smallville and Superman talk now that their series rewatch has concluded. Listen wherever you get podcasts and keep an eye out for the other shows under the Always Hold On To banner, including Arrow, Star Wars, and more. We love digging into epic comic book runs, but what about the art of the single issue? Single Bound is a new podcast series hosted by married couple Amy and Logan as they review single issues of comics. And if the title also makes you think of Superman, you're not alone, as the Man of Steel is Logan's favorite character and a regular topic of discussion on Single Bound. Listen and subscribe on Spotify and YouTube, and follow the show on Instagram at Single Bound Podcast. We all love the big-budget superhero films, but the world of independent cinema remains a place of unbridled creative freedom and entrepreneurial spirit. Whether you're an independent filmmaker yourself, or you just love movies, don't miss these New Jersey film festivals: Brightside Tavern in Jersey City, Hang On to Your Shorts in Asbury Park, and Round Reel in Bloomfield. Submission information for filmmakers can be found at filmfreeway.com. Follow the festivals on social media for news about events, discounts, tickets, and much more. And now, joining me to discuss 9 more times across time and media that Lois Lane gained superpowers is first-time guest Chris MacKenzie. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm ready to count down all of this crazy Superwoman instances. Yeah.
Yeah, this will
by
be
no
fun.
means the full library of Superwoman instances for Lois or whatever. Yeah.
Yes, as I explained to DeVoe at the end of the last segment, this is not an exhaustive list. There are more instances in which Lois gained powers, but we wanted to keep it to 10, including Rise of the Superwoman. And you and I selected these instances that we're going to talk about. I think they're some of the most impactful ones, especially when we get to a couple of the television instances. And I think we have a great list here to really have a fun survey and to sustain our conversation. And while this is your first time digging for Kryptonite, you have joined me on the Patreon show, Beyond Metropolis. Most recently, we covered the John Wesley Shipp Flash series, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah, if you want to hear me just a gush, nothing but love for a one-season series from 1990 and 91, it's a whole two-part discussion on on the overall greatness of that Flash series or whatever, with some stumbles early on, but like, yeah.
Yeah, I'm so glad I finally watched it, and I had so much fun talking about it with you, and I appreciated all of your enthusiasm for the show and your insight, and it was really a lot of fun, so I encourage people to check that out. So, Chris, a few days before this recording, James Gunn and Rachel Brosnahan did an interview where she expressed a strong interest in playing Lois with powers as Superwoman in an upcoming film. How'd you feel about that?
I'm all for it. Let's do a full like Lois as Superwoman. It doesn't have to be like, it can be like All-Star where it's like a temporary thing or whatever, but I think that would be so much fun. And it seems like she's very much like, she knows enough about the comics. She's like, oh yeah, I'm on board for that whole. And this most recent Superwoman arc has been great. So
I have to say, I'm open to it. The fact that she has that much enthusiasm for it definitely makes me even more open to the idea. I'm still a little bit skeptical about sacrificing too much of that cinematic real estate for something like that. But if it fits, if it works in a story, I think it could be cool. I guess the sweet spot for me would be if we do get an HBO Max series that's focused on Jimmy and or Lois and or the Daily Planet, whatever permutation it takes, if it happens, that maybe that could be an ideal spot for it. So I guess overall, I'm really kind of keen to see it explored, especially if she has that much interest in it. But yeah, I kind of look at a series as maybe the better vehicle for it.
Yeah, that would make it better. Like if it was just like an episode devoted to like her as Superwoman and or Jimmy even getting powers too, or something like that, where they both like a la the George Reeves show. It's like that would be fun to just do for an episode with them trying to deal with having powers that they don't know what to do with.
I know. We'll see. Well, to whatever extent we can help manifest this, as we sometimes do on Digging for Kryptonite, we'll put it out into the universe and we'll see what happens.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm ready for whatever comes next. So
we have 9 instances we're going to talk about here. We have a trio of pre-crisis comics, a trio of television episodes, and a trio of modern comics that will be the subject of discussion here. So we'll go through each one, but just let me ask you, big picture, what your overall impressions were of these.
Overall, they were all really enjoyable. Like I've obviously watched the Smallville and Lois and Clark, and I caught part of the Adventures of Superman episode as far as the episodes go. The rest of the comics, those are the first time that I read the Golden Age and Silver Age, but I've read other like Silver Age Lois stuff where she has like Kryptonite vision or she has like the powers of a witch or whatever it is. It's like always, that's like a go-to for them for like the Silver Age pre-crisis stuff. And the same with Lana. Lana gets powers, and Jimmy does too, gets powers like constantly. But the modern ones, All-Star I've read multiple times, but then the other two are like brand new. So I knew of that Superwoman series, but I didn't ever like read it at the time when Rebirth was going on. And then the Tales of the Dark Multiverse was a brand new experience for me because I have not dived into like the full death metal dark multiverse. Like I know what it is, but I haven't gone down the rabbit hole as you have on your Red Skies event.
As much as I did, I still didn't make it as far as Tales from the Dark Multiverse. I tapped out, but I did find that one particularly interesting. And yeah, I'd say overall for myself, I really enjoyed this homework assignment, especially when we got to the entries that I think hit the sweet spot for me, where they reveal something about Lois or they reveal something to Lois, right? About Clark and their relationship. And I think those were the instances that really resonated the most and that to me kind of demonstrate the greatest value that can be had when you imbue Lois with powers for a finite amount of time. But yeah, overall, a ton of fun. Should we start at the beginning with Action Comics number 60 in 1943?
Sure, let's do it.
So, classic Golden Age story here where Lois is hit by a truck because Clark is bothering her in the street asking why she doesn't care for him.
That was an intense opening. I was like, oh, damn, she just got run over or whatever. And it was just like, and now she's in the hospital. I was like, oh my God. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, that was a wild setup. And then she has this dream that Superman gives her a blood transfusion and she develops these powers and she becomes Superwoman. So this is the first instance of this idea. And of course, it is a dream sequence, but still an interesting story. I wanted to get your take on the visual of this. So she's wearing long blue pants with a blue skirt, sleeveless top, and then gloves, right? And of course the cape. Like, what'd you make of the visuals of this?
It's like the first time that any other character in the comics had a costume other than him. So it's kind of like, I think they were just trying to kind of work it out and see what it looked like. But, and when she gets powers, because this is Golden Age, so she like gets into fisticuffs, like right off the bat, like with a bunch of like gangsters at one point and like knocks their cars over and is like being very quippy with them and stuff. And I'm like, I go, now this is fun. Like this was like the height of like Golden Age fun right here is like her doing that. And then also grabbing Clark, who instantly recognizes her as Lois, but takes her to like a tall roof and then basically says, you can't tell anyone that I'm Superwoman, essentially. And like he's still trying to figure out like, what the hell is going on? And then so he's like, he please just put me back down on the ground. It's the traditional like Golden Age, like meek and mild, like, you know, Clark. Just like, but she's so forceful with him or whatever. It's so funny. It's just like, listen up, buddy. Yeah, anyway.
Yeah, tough Golden Age Lois. No, it was fun. Yeah, I mean, she gets right into it. She breaks up a domestic dispute. She saves Clark, like you said. And then she ultimately rescues Superman.
Yes, in which he tells her, and I think the villain is like Dr. Scowl, but he basically is like, you can't save me or whatever. And she's like, try me. And then ultimately it ends with her basically being like, for 5 years, I've been chasing after you and you've been basically avoiding this for this long time. But she basically has all these like this insane amount of like words in this word bubble for a Golden Age story. Like basically saying that she's basically in love with him and like, are you going to marry me or what at this point? Because now I have powers. And he's like, well, I don't know. And then I thought it was, I mean, consent is important, but it was cute when he's just like, well, I don't know. And then she just like kisses him and she's like, I accept. And then he basically is just like, he goes, well, what's a Superman to do or something or whatever. Yeah. And then of course it's all a dream.
Yeah. I mean, she really takes charge. Oh, what I liked about this was that, yes, you do ultimately get to that point of her asking about their relationship, but that wasn't the driving force of the story. And I appreciated that. Right, because we'll get to an upcoming instance where it's the complete opposite of that. So I thought here it was really, really refreshing to see it take the course that it did. So yeah, I mean, I think a fun first outing for Lois as Superwoman. Now I'm going to jump ahead in time a little bit since we just talked about one dream sequence. I'm going to plunge us ahead to the final episode, the series finale of the George Reeves television series, Adventures of Superman. It's season 6, episode 13, All That Glitters from 1958. Now, I feel like I'm cheating a little bit here because, as you know, I have a whole side podcast called Another Exciting Episode in the Adventures of Superman. We go episode by episode, and we're still a year away from the series finale. I don't want to say too much now because I really want to save further thoughts for when we get there.
Yeah.
But this is another instance where we see not just Lois, but Jimmy as well with powers, but it's all a dream. In this case, Jimmy, he gets bonked on the head, and he has this dream that the nutty Professor Pepperwinkle has been able to separate out the different components of kryptonite. There's positive kryptonite and negative kryptonite. And positive kryptonite, when chewed in tablet form, bestows Lois and Jimmy with powers. And you see them busting through walls and flying and nabbing the bad guys. What did you make of this?
I thought it was funny because it's like Nolan Neal didn't get to do a whole lot because it's still sort of the 50s. And so it's like she gets to kick down a door. But when they're like shooting at them, Jimmy has to step in front of her, even though they're both bulletproof. And then he's the one that gets to like engage in like a few like punches to the stomach with the bad guys. So it's kind of like she has powers, but it's mostly just her smiling while they're flying through the air. And then like I think they do X-ray vision at one point with the door and everything. Yeah. But yeah, she just gets to very daintily kick down a giant door. That's
Yeah, it was. I agree with all that. It was fairly limited. And in fairness, like you said, I mean, this was Jimmy's dream. So I understand that maybe Lois didn't have as much to do in it. I guess the other things that stood out to me about this, even though they have powers, Lois and Jimmy, there's no costume, right? They're just in their regular, typical Daily Planet work clothes. But you do see them flying, just like we see George Reeves flying in the episodes, which was striking to me because, I mean, unless I'm really blanking here, I don't think there's any other instance in the series where anyone other than Superman is doing the flying. So that was kind of an outlier in terms of seeing other characters on screen in flight. I mean, there have been other episodes where Superman was carrying someone, but like they're flying full on their own.
And most of the time it's the same footage with George, like over and over and over and over again. So it's funny that I know it wasn't necessarily supposed to be the final episode. They were supposed to come back and then George passed away, but I know they like to filmed it very quickly and tried to save money as much as they could. And they're like, I'm sorry guys, we need to get in the harnesses like right now. and then just, I think it's like, it may be the same shot, like going back and forth. Like it's like they just reversed the shot or something.
Yeah, for sure. I would not have put it past them to just kind of have them jump out of frame and then we hear the sound effect of flying, but we don't actually see them. So the fact that they showed us that, and this episode was one of 3 directed by series star George Reeves himself, which is cool. Yeah, not necessarily the strongest note for the series to go out on, wasn't meant to be the final episode, like you said, but yeah, it's another instance of Lois with powers, even though you don't really get much insight from her. I mean, at the end of the episode, after Jimmy has woken up and realizes that it was a dream and everything, they've all convened in Perry's office. And I think she has a line about how, only Superman can do these things. Not necessarily any insight gleaned per se. But now let's jump back to those other pre-crisis comics that we took a look at. One of them was Action Comics 156 from 1951, where Lex Luthor invents a gizmo to bestow powers. What'd you make of this one?
Well, it was happy to see Lex because I haven't read too much Golden Age with Lex, just a little bit. So it was nice to see. At this point, he's already bald. He's already established as like the arch nemesis and everything. So what's interesting is like they do this one other time too. Before Kara Zor-El, like actual Supergirl, shows up, Lois in this case, she gets the powers and she dons a blonde wig. And her outfit is very similar to Kara's like first Supergirl outfit, although she's like a Superwoman in this case. But they do this one other time. There was another, like, I don't know if it was a Jimmy Olsen issue. A long time ago, I read this. And it was like, Jimmy gets like, I don't know, it's like a monkey's paw or something that gives him like wishes and things go horribly awry. But he wishes for Superman to have help. And then literally a Supergirl with blonde hair in the same exact outfit that Kara will have, like shows up, and then eventually like all the wishes are undone and she's just gone. But then literally like 2 years later, Kara's ship crashes and it's like, Superman's like, oh my God, a Supergirl or whatever. And I'm like, you've mentioned Supergirl like more than once at this point. Anyway.
No, 100%. That was my biggest takeaway from that issue was how, it serves as this forerunner to Supergirl. The look is strikingly similar because like you said, Lois dons this blonde wig in her Superwoman guise. I guess the other things that stood out to me about this one was, Lois is investigating Lex because she hears someone talking about this invention of his, and she tracks him down at the place where he's meant to be working based on his parole information, right? It's like an electronics store or something like that. And she sneaks in and she finds this device and she just turns it on. I mean, taking a little bit of a risk there. And yeah, she ends up with these powers. I guess I'm a little split on this, and I welcome your thoughts because on the one hand, I thought it was interesting that they show there's a learning curve to this, right? Like she tries to stop a bank robbery and she kind of botches it and leads to these few different disasters, and Superman has to intervene. And then later, Lex essentially tricks her into rebuilding him a new, better device. And then turns out Superman was there all along, and he saves the day. And her last line is about how these powers without wisdom, right, will only get you so far. So this idea that yes, she had the power, but she wasn't necessarily well equipped as to how to use them. And so I'm a little bit split on this because on the one hand, I do think that's a valuable lesson generally, but in terms of how it played here, I don't know that it did the character of Lois a ton of favors. I'm curious what you made of this.
No, it was kind of like Lex was like kind of trigger, and he was he counted on, I think it was like the vanium or something is like the source of like whatever mineral that he has that like creates this temporary super effect, and he's basically trying to like wear out her superpowers so that she'll be like, so he'll have the machine, he'll destroy Superman or whatever he's up to, and she'll be like powerless, which is basically what happens. Like at the last second, she essentially loses the powers, and thankfully Superman's there to save the day. But yeah, it's kind of like Lois just like, yeah, she just turns on the machine. I don't know, maybe like wait for Superman to get there and maybe both of you investigate it. Or Clark to be there. It's just kind of like, it's definitely Golden Age Lois where she's just like, she jumps first and doesn't really always consider like what's going to happen.
Well, continuing on to the next entry here, if there ever were a story that's a product of its time, it's Superman's Girlfriend, Lois Lane, number 21 from 1960. Now, there are 3 chapters to this issue. The first 2 comprise one story. The Super Lois versus Super Lana story is the final chapter of this issue, and the one that inspires the cover, which even if people have not read the issue, if you're a Superman fan, you've almost certainly come across this issue at some point of a superpowered Lois and a superpowered Lana in costume, literally fighting over Superman. And in the story, these 2 romantic rivals, they go swimming in this magic lake that gives them, once again, these temporary superpowers, and they don costumes and they compete for Superman's affections. Now, Chris, let me ask you, if someone were trying to earn your affection, what would sway you more, a giant pizza pie or a huge stack of flapjacks?
I mean, I think I'm going to go with like the giant pizza thing. I think that is the deciding. So maybe, I guess I am I'm a Klana fan and not a Close fan or whatever. Like I thought, I don't know.
Okay, fair enough. I'm going flapjacks because here's the thing, not to be like a pizza snob or whatnot, but I feel like if you're making a pizza that large, I feel like you're sacrificing quality, and I'm not going to get that thin crust, that crisp that I like to have in my pizza pie. So I don't know how good it would be, but I feel like that giant stack of pancakes, oh man, I go to town on those. So I guess I'm a Lois guy. Or what are your impressions of this?
Well, see, this is the thing. Like, this is the definition of like Silver Age. Like, this is the Silver Age that we know and love, or we try to make it through these stories as best we can. Because like, they literally like, it's just so random because they're just like, Lana's like, hey, you want to go swim in that lake that's in those caves over there or whatever? And Lois like, yeah, sure. It's just like so like breezy. Like, it's just like, yeah, we're just going to swim in these like weird, like, it's fine. There's some sort of Native American legend where you can get powers. It'll be fine. But it's just like, it was just so wild. It was just like, I think that's the Silver Age, is like things just sort of happen and you just have to kind of go with it because they don't like explain things. They just kind of toss things off and are like, here you go. We just need to get them to have powers, and let's just figure out a way to do it.
Yeah, very much so. Look, I learned over these past few years how to access these Silver Age stories, and that's the way. You just kind of got to go along for the ride, and also recognize, like we said, I think this is one that's very much a product of its time, not progressive in its depiction of our 2 female characters here, but we're not breaking any new ground with that. It is what it is, and that, like I said, I mean, that cover, that imagery is iconic in its own right. I mean, in fact, when Byrne took over, right, in the 80s, there was that issue of Action Comics that played on that idea, right, that had the 2 of them fighting on the cover, and there's that blurb about this does not actually happen in the issue and all that. But yeah, I mean, they compete. There's a horseback rider who's in distress. One of them saves the rider. The other one calms the horse. They engage in this cook-off, the pizza pie versus the pancakes. So the whole thrust of this is that essentially he's never made a choice and he's never moved forward with either of them because they would be in danger, right, if they were with him. But now, right, that they're not vulnerable, they have these powers. Now he actually could be with one of them. And I mean, he even goes so far as he to agree to make a choice between the 2 of them. But before that can happen, the powers wear off. And he's such a dick at the end because they're like, well, can you at least tell us who you were going to choose? And he uses his heat vision to carve an LL into the stone. Obviously, that is not determinative. All he will confirm in that final panel was that it's not Lex Luthor.
Yeah, because Lois is like, she goes, well, that could be either of us. And I'm like, this is the whole thing with him not wanting to be with them with powers, like with them without powers, is BS. It's like I read this other Silver Age issue where like Supergirl is finally like revealed to the public. She's been kind of like hiding. She's been adopted by the Danvers and everything. So like they tell the Danvers, who are just normal people, like, by the way, she's Supergirl. Like Superman and her tell them together. And it's like, you just have to keep her secret and everything. It's like, well, aren't they in danger too? Anyway, like they're just normal people. And they're like, and they literally have Supergirl in their home. I'm like, if anyone found out her identity, yeah, they'd be in danger. It's like, Clark, I think you really just don't want to be tied down. It's like, they're just constantly fighting over him in these Silver Age issues. It's like, he's not there for it yet. He's not ready yet. I mean,
I think the kind of the facetious answer is exactly that. And you beat me to it by a second. It's just like, he doesn't want to be tied down. He wants to keep his options open. I think if we want to be more sincere, I think I would put stock in kind of that talk that Superman has with Perry in Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow about what each of these women represent to him and how he'll always care for Lana, but Lois is the one, but that he doesn't want to hurt either of them. Right. So if I'm going to really give him the benefit of the doubt, maybe it's that he really doesn't want to make that choice and hurt one of them. But yeah, I had the same thought as you. It's like, it's just kind of a flimsy excuse.
Yeah, well, and if you've read Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, this is the exact costume that Lana puts back on, and she gets into the water to give herself temporary powers again, which the cave collapses at some point later in that issue or whatever. And I'm like, did he go back and like just get the water out of the cave and put it like back in the? Because he talked about he made these costumes when he gave them temporary powers before, and I didn't read that one, so I don't know if it was like yet another incidence of some sort of water or chemical or whatever, but like. It's definitely the same costume that she puts on in Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow. So yeah, it was nice to read like the first part, like the first story that happens in.
It was nice. It definitely called to mind whatever happened. And yeah, that business about bathing in the magical water. And so, yeah, it was nice to see where that came from. All right. Shall we jump ahead to the mid-90s? Are you ready?
I'm ready for this Lois and Clark discussion.
All right. Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, Season 3, Episode 7, Ultra Woman from 1995, where these two sisters blast Superman while he's hugging Lois to protect her with red kryptonite. They think it's going to make him apathetic because that's what it did the last time Superman was exposed to red kryptonite. But red kryptonite, unpredictable as ever, instead, in this instance, transfers Superman's powers to Lois, who dons the costume and identity of Ultra Woman. And it hits at such a critical juncture in the show and in their relationship, because at this point he's proposed, but they're in kind of a nebulous spot in their relationship. And she has very recently figured out that Clark is Superman. So she knows the secret. But yeah, they're really at a crossroads. And we see early on in the episode, Clark has the ring, right? He still has the ring. He's holding it. She clocks this, and this will pay off at the end of the episode. But I had so much fun rewatching this. And this is, I would say on this list, certainly, this is the first really meaningful instance of a version of Lois getting powers where I think it's truly revealing with respect to her character and really progresses that relationship between them and gives her such insight into Clark's day-to-day. And we'll talk more about that. But early on, I think one of the things that really jumped out at me was, unlike, I think, all of these other instances we're talking about, it's not like she got the powers and was instantly like, gung-ho, get me a costume, right? It took a little bit to get her there. I thought it was an interesting spin on it.
Well, yeah, because he first, like, they're out in the woods and he's like, all right, he goes A+ on the heat vision or whatever. And she's like, actually, I was trying to hit that, like the bottles I wasn't. And she was like, and the whole stump is like cinders. And then she stops this truck that's going out of, control or whatever. And she doesn't really know how to do it, but she stops it. And then he changes into costume really quick and is like, he's like, it was Superman that saved me. He goes, because he they deflect attention away from Lois. But anyway, they're like having this cute conversation. He goes, it did reveal something to me. He goes, what just happened? He's like, you're not the kind of person that can just sit by and let people be in danger or whatever. And she's like, oh no. And he's like, she goes, is this what means what I think it means or whatever? And then it instantly cuts to the Kents being like, handing her like all the fabric. It's like, all right, we're going to do a costume or whatever. And she's like, does this mean I have to wear glasses at work? No, we're thinking a mask. And then Martha's like, and of course a cape. And she's like, Lois is like, well, I don't think I can do this. And the most funny reaction is Martha going, no cape? No, she goes, I mean, any of it. She goes, this is Clark's thing or whatever. Like, this isn't my thing, you know? And basically she's clocking that like Clark might be feeling some type of way that she has these powers. And now it's up to her to figure out how to do this until they can get it like switched back, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, you know, in other stories that we looked at here, Lois also has powers, right? But this is a story where Clark doesn't. And that's also what we're going to see in a little while when we look at that Smallville episode, the penultimate episode of the series. But even there's a distinction because in that episode, Jor-El is putting Lois and Clark through a trial where he gives Lois Clark's powers and Clark is powerless, but for a set time limit until sunset. And they know that they have an out to this. Whereas in the Lois and Clark episode, it's an open question whether or not they'll be able to repair that ray gun that caused this in the first place and restore his powers. Obviously, by the end of the episode, Clark gets his powers back, but it's an open question for the episode. And yeah, Clark is trying to be supportive, but like you said, definitely feels some sort of way. So yeah, I think it's a fascinating episode, certainly from Clark's perspective, but even more so for Lois, because you see her struggling with the limitations, despite all the power that she has. I mean, there's that one point where she rips a door off of the car to save the wife, and then the husband's yelling at her for ripping off the door. And then she's told about this disaster in one place, and she's hearing about something somewhere else, and she has to make this call about where to go. And there's another point in the episode. This is the one where Alice leaves Perry. Perry confides in Jimmy and Clark, and Clark fills Lois in on this later, and she had no idea about it, right? Because she was off doing her Ultra Woman thing, and she's like, "Oh, like I missed it. Like, is this what it's like, right? Because I'm always off running around." So you know, it's I would say this one more than any other really showed the struggle, the challenge. I feel like in most of these other instances that we're talking about, more or less, right? Like you kind of see Lois having fun with it, leaning into it. I feel like here, like I said, there was a little more reluctance at the beginning. And I mean, I don't know, in this episode, with the exception of X-raying Clark, right, to check out what he's got under that suit, it didn't seem like this was necessarily a fun ride for her, right?
No, that was the only kind of like flirty moment. But then it quickly takes a turn because when she's trying to figure out how to navigate all this, eventually he gets captured by those sisters, just as Clark, and can't easily get out of it. He does, but then she has to come and frame, and they X-ray, and they've taken off the place where they were like keeping him. But that's when she really has like, Terry Hatcher gives it her all in this, because she's just like, she goes, she was stopping a hijacking. She goes, I heard about a mudslide. She goes, but no matter, I flew there as fast as I could, but I couldn't stop it. And she goes, and all those people died. He goes, you're only one person, no matter how fast you are, it's always going to be stuff like this or whatever. He goes, you just have to learn to live with it because you're only human. Like, even though he is, yes, a Kryptonian, he's raised as a human, and he's only one superhero, as far as we know, on this particular Earth. So it's like, yeah, he's going to not be able to get everywhere at once all the time.
Yeah, and it really pays off at the end of the episode where they go to the fountain where he had proposed to her at the end of the previous season. And before she returns the favor and proposes to him, she talks about essentially what she learned through this experience, that she always knew how big his heart was, but she didn't know how strong it was, right? To hear all of these cries and not be able to save everyone, right? This whole notion of, for all of these powers, there's still so much he can't do. And that was something that she hadn't really appreciated before. And then at least this great moment where we get the flip of the end of season 2 where she proposes, and just like she had said, who's asking, Clark or Superwoman? He said, or Clark or Superman. He turns it around and says, who's asking, Lois or Ultra Woman? Which I thought was great. But I loved that she walked a mile in his boots, right? And came away with this understanding about what his day-to-day is like and the sacrifices that he has to engage in. And I just thought it was really interesting.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I thought was so charming, I'm usually kind of hard on Justin Whalen's Jimmy Olsen for seasons 3, like 2 through 4. But I thought this was a genius thing for Jimmy, that he instantly, and also like Perry and Jimmy walk over to her when she makes her debut as Ultra Woman. And she's like, oh, this is not going to go. She goes, they're going to get me in a second. And Clark just just chuckles and he's like, don't bet on it. You'd be surprised. And then they don't. They're like, Ultra Woman, like that. But Jimmy is instantly smitten with her and talks to Lois about it. And it's just because Lois doesn't verbalize this, but this is what she did to Superman in season 1, where she was super swoony over him. And now Jimmy, it's like on the other thing. And now she has to feel what Clark was feeling with Jimmy being like, I think I'm just in love with her or whatever. And she's just like, thinking it's sweet, but it's also like, oh God. Anyway, and then they make up an excuse like, oh, Ultraman is leaving or whatever. We don't know if she's coming back, but she does give him the thing. She's like, well, she did tell me to tell you that she thinks you're cute. And then he's like over the moon and like telling everyone in the office while he runs off that Ultraman thinks he's cute. But I'm like, it's just because they don't verbalize it the way that you think they would with the show, where they like refer back to something, but it, like from, the first season, really. But it's like, yeah, it's exactly what you did to Superman when you first met him.
I agree wholeheartedly. I thought that it was very endearing. And I had the same thought that, yes, it's very much a parallel to what we saw in the first season with Lois swooning over Superman. And I agree that, yeah, it's not explicitly addressed. And that was the question that I was going to have for you is, do you think Lois actually recognized her past behavior in Jimmy now? I mean, I have to imagine she did.
I would think Lois at this point, like in season 3, now that she knows the secret, I think she does. I think she clocks it. And I think that's why she's so like, oh boy, like, like it's like now she realizes like what that was like for Clark. I think she learns and she figures out a way to do it without being insensitive to him or anything. She kind of just was like, just kind of plays along and then just says like, well, she had to leave and we don't know if she's coming back or not. But she did say that you're pretty cute. Yeah. So.
Yeah, for sure. She threw him a bone there, and that was something that clearly was very meaningful to him. What did you make of her costume?
I mean, it's the 90s or whatever. It's you would think it would be more like Superman's, but it really isn't. It's like, it's basically the same sort of like spandex suit, and so it has like the U and the W, where the cape attaches or whatever, and she has like the mask and stuff on or whatever to hide her identity. I think it's as well as you could do for like 90s superhero, like for this show.
Well, if we ever get a line of Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, Funko Pops, I would love to see an Ultra Woman variant, and I would definitely get that. But yeah, it was cool. Like, this was honestly, looking at this list of 9 that we're talking about, and I know this might surprise people given my deep love of Smallville, but if I had to pick a favorite out of all of the ones we looked at, it was this episode. All right, so let's look at sort of the other side of this coin with the episode of Smallville from 2011. So this is season 10, episode 20, the penultimate episode of the entire series called Prophecy. And like I was mentioning a moment ago, we have Lois and Clark going to the fortress because Clark wants Jor-El's blessing of their upcoming union. And Jor-El decides to transfer Clark's powers to Lois for a day. She leans right into this, right? Because we're at her office and she's zipping back and forth. There's the story that she's investigating that ties into Toyman. Essentially, he's behind this group called Marionette Ventures that's been buying up all of these properties along the river to gain water rights. And she's zipping around and they're investigating this story. I think one of the most interesting scenes in this one is when they're out on the street on their stakeout. And you have Clark explaining, well, 2 things. One, how he uses his powers, right? He gives her some instruction on how to access the super hearing. But then that leads to the second thing that I think is probably the most interesting aspect of this is she's hearing all of these emergencies. And you get a great sense of how Clark is able to prioritize. She's like, oh, there's a fire. And she tells Clark the address. And he's like, no, there's a fire station a couple blocks away. Like, they'll be fine. She hears a car accident. She's like, I got to go. It sounds bad. He's like, just wait, listen. She's like, okay, they're exchanging information. They're all right. And she's like, how do you do this? Like, how do you ignore this? Like, I don't ignore it, but I have to prioritize. And she's like, oh, like an ER doctor. But a la Lois and Clark, I just thought it was so interesting, this insight that she's able to glean into how Clark goes about this. And I also liked it too, because it's like for the audience, I remember really being struck by it because as much as Clark was very active in those final seasons as the Red, Blue, Blur, and then the Blur, that was still more specific than the show really ever got as far as his day-to-day superheroing. And so I just really, really liked that insight.
Yeah, I thought that was like, because I haven't watched Smallville for years now. So this is the first time I went back to it. And probably the most fascinating part of the whole episode was just how he's like, and this is what I do every day. It's like, you just have to sort of prioritize stuff.
Yeah, man, it was great. And then eventually she tracks down Toyman, Toyman's in prison, but he's still pulling all of these strings and carrying this out. And he threatens Clark's life. And in order to quote unquote protect Clark, she plants this device on herself that allows Toyman to control her, and he instructs her to kill Clark. And then we have this big confrontation, and he's able to make this appeal to her and at least try to get her to hold her back long enough for the sun to set and for his powers to return. But after he gets his powers back, there's this great scene at the final scene of the episode where they are all set to go to their rehearsal dinner. And I found the scene very moving. I thought Erica Durance was great in this, where she talks about how weak she was, right? And how Clark was this vulnerability to her in that instance. And now she feels that's what she is to him, right? And on top of it, that anytime he's with her, he's not out saving people, and that she's depriving the world of this man, and that she can't marry him. So it's interesting. Obviously they work it out in the finale, and I guess they wanted to have that arc in the finale of the show, right? They wanted to start from this place of them split and then bring them back together. But it was really interesting to me as a flip on the Lois and Clark version, where as Ultra Woman, Lois gained this insight. It brought them closer. Whereas here, Lois spent the day with his powers and really just came away feeling like she's always going to be this vulnerability, this weakness to him, and that she's depriving the world. And again, this gets acknowledged in the finale. Chloe has this whole thing, the whole conversation with Lois where she's like, he's not God. He's a man. He needs to rest. He can't do this 24/7. But yeah, I thought that last scene was great. What'd you think of it?
Yeah, that was a standout and then I forgot because it's like, oh yeah, they break up right before the finale or whatever.
I actually joined Zach Moore and fellow guest Matt Truex on Always Hold On to Smallville to talk about this episode. So if people want 2+ hours all about prophecy, it's there. I encourage people to listen. So I've revisited this episode fairly recently, but I do enjoy it. One of the things that always comes up for me when we look at this is, and I have to get past this, it's as far from the only instance in Smallville where this happens, where someone else gets Clark's powers and they figure it out real fast. And it's just funny to me because for Clark, every time he developed a new power, it was a whole episode of him figuring out how to use it. And yet when other people, including Lois in this particular episode, get his powers, and yes, there's the scene of him explaining how to do the super hearing, but it's like she picks it up real quick.
Yeah, she's already doing super speed right off the bat. That is I think a trope throughout superhero comics and adaptations. Whenever someone other than the superhero gets the powers, they figure it out pretty quickly. And you're like, he's been doing this for 10 years. And she has it for a couple hours and she's like, no, I'm good. I'm fine.
I'll be a little generous and say that maybe we can reconcile it a little bit in that, especially at this point in the show, it's been almost an entire season where she's known his secret, right? And she's been side by side with him. And so maybe she has observed him enough, or she's asked him enough questions about how he does what he does, where it's given her a little bit of a head start. I also wonder too, Clark developed these powers even though he looked like he was in his 20s because the actor was, but as a little teenage boy. So maybe the fact that she's a fully grown adult, maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know, but we go along with it. But yeah, the Smallville episode and the Lois and Clark episode really stood out to me the most, right? For what Lois is able to realize about everything that Clark goes through, what he has to hear, what he has to prioritize, what he can't get to, those limitations. Those really, really stood out to me. All right, so now we have these 3 comic book issues. So we'll start with All-Star Superman #3 by Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely from 2006. And this is the issue where Superman gives Lois a serum that gives her his powers for a day, and it's her birthday present. And this is the issue with Samson and Atlas and the Ultra Sphinx that is after them because they stole her radioactive necklace, and the great unanswerable question, what happens when the unstoppable force meets the immovable object? The answer that Clark, Superman, is able to answer. They surrender because he had seen a newspaper with an ad that spoke to that. But as far as the Superwoman of it all, right from the jump, man, the thing I love so much is how quickly she downs that potion. Right, no hesitation there. I love that. I love that enthusiasm.
Yeah, she doesn't hold back at all. And then I love when they're like flying in Metropolis, and it's like the dino people from the center of the earth have invaded or whatever. And he goes, oh man, he goes, I'm sorry, he goes, Lois, he goes, I just wanted us to have fun on your birthday. He goes, I didn't think that there would be subterranean reptiles attacking Metropolis. She's like, are you kidding me? She goes, I would feel cheated if it wasn't happening or whatever. She goes, let's go. Again, another throwback. Like, this is very much a throwback to the Silver Age, him giving her powers for a day, and then those two guys showing up, time traveling or whatever, and basically just stealing thunder. And I love that she's like kind of like flirting with them. But this is still the Lois in this one, which is so funny that she still thinks that he's not really Clark Kent, that they're not the same person, that he's like pulling her leg. She's like, well, this is getting you back for that whole you're really Clark Kent practical joke.
Yeah, her response when he apologizes for this subterranean invasion that they have to stop was great. Where she's like, I'd be disappointed if this didn't happen. And that felt 1,000% like Lois Lane, right? She wants the action. She wants to see what it would be like in that kind of situation. But I have to say, far and away, my favorite moment comes right at the end where she says to Superman, she's like, everyone can figure out why Lois Lane loves Superman, but why me? It's like, why do you choose me? And I just love his response where he's like, Lois, I guess there has to be one thing I just can't help. Right. And then he takes her it's up to the moon for that smooch. He's like, it's something I've always wanted to do. I just thought it was such a great moment.
That is like one of the standout moments of that whole All-Star Superman, but it's like an all-time Superman and Lois moment. Yeah. And then I think and then it's like she's, powering down at the end and she's getting sleepy or whatever. And he's just like talking to her. And I think it's like he wants to ask, I think it's like, is he going to like, I think he's like asking if he's going to propose to her or something like that, where he's like, there's something I've always wanted to ask you. And by that time she's like fully like conked out. And she goes, I can't hear the stars singing anymore. She goes, I can't see all these, the whole spectrum that you see or whatever. She goes, because I feel like I've been dancing all night. My legs are tired and everything's sore.
Yeah, it's a great scene. Yeah, I agree. I mean, when he says there's something I've always wanted to ask you, and then he starts, will you? It certainly seems like he's going to propose. Then again, he knows he has limited time left because he's dying of this sun radiation poisoning. So I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I think that would kind of be the natural answer of what he would be asking her. But yeah, great issue. And yeah, those moments in particular just felt so true to both their characters, but especially Lois, with just how quickly she was on board with this, how excited she was, how enthused she was to be in the middle of that action. And then, yeah, that really, really sweet moment between them in space was just, such a standout. All right, continuing along on the comic book front here, jumping ahead to 2016 with Superwoman #1 by Phil Jimenez. This is from the DC Rebirth era. So right before this, the New 52 Superman sacrificed himself, gave his life, and discharged all of this energy, which, as we find out here in Superwoman #1, imbued both Lois Lane, the New 52 Lois Lane, and Lana Lang with powers. And so Lois is very gung-ho in her role as Superwoman. Lana, a bit more reluctant throughout the issue. We're in the present as Lex, and this is Lex in his own Superman battlesuit era, debuting this big battleship and everything that then is attacked. And then we jump back and forth between that and Lois and Lana on the farm. Lana is going to train Lois just like she trained Clark, but then Lois has this whole thing about Lana getting in on the action as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting because this Lois in the New 52, she didn't have a romance or relationship with Clark or Superman. So it's like, this Lana and Lois have a very different dynamic than they usually do. They're not they're not like in the Silver Age, like where they're fighting over Clark or fighting over Superman. This is just them like Lana sort of not wanting to really have that superhero life. She's fine without having it. She kind of reluctantly takes on that role of Superwoman. And then spoiler alert, New 52 Lois doesn't make it past the first issue or whatever.
Yeah, Lois is killed at the end of the first issue. And like I said, I didn't read this at the time, but I remember having an awareness of it. And if I'm not mistaken, I mean, they hit the ball on that. I think this was billed as it's going to be Superwoman with the two of them, if I'm not mistaken. And then the big twist was that, no, it's just going to be focusing on Lana because Lois dies. And then that paves the way for the post-crisis Lois to go public and essentially take over the New 52 Lois's life, just like the post-crisis Superman had stepped in for the New 52 Superman after he died. And then by the time we get to that reborn storyline, the post-crisis and New 52 versions of Lois and Clark will be merged. If you're listening to this, you have no idea what the hell I'm talking about. It's a whole thing. Don't worry about it. But that's kind of the backstory.
Like Lois gets killed like right off the bat. I was like, whoa. I'm like, and kind of like just gets like set on fire. And like, yeah, I mean, she gets taken out pretty quickly or whatever. And basically what it happens is that it's Lex's sister, Lena, who has her own even more giant battle suit. And she's got a whole army of female bizarros, essentially, that are like her like own little army that she's like attacking people with and stuff. And eventually Lana takes care of it. But it's like, yeah, that's like right off the gate. It's just like, oh, Lois is dead. It is confusing if you don't understand like what the New 52 is doing like right before this all happened. And then the fact that there's that Lois and Clark series, and this is all coming out of the Convergence crossover. So there's a lot of stuff like going on to set up this Lana Lang a Superwoman series. There
is a lot of stuff going on, but you know what I will say, look, as far as her actual death, I did find it kind of anticlimactic. I mean, it's not like I knew she died going into this reading. I knew that this was her only issue as Superwoman. I did think, though, that she was going to have a bigger moment of self-sacrifice or something like that. But yeah, I mean, it happens very abruptly, which, adds to the surprise factor in fairness. So it's a twist. And I guess credit that they were able, I mean, as far as I know, I mean, I don't know if this was something that leaked, if people had some kind of sense of what was coming. But if not, I mean, at least, they were able to kind of preserve that surprise. I'll say this, as I've been saying, we talked about this a bit when we did the Rise of the Superwoman segment, and all these other ones that we're looking at, like they're isolated instances where Lois has powers. So in keeping with that, I guess I'm glad that this Lois wasn't Superwoman for an entire series, because I really do think her as Superwoman works best for a finite amount of time. At the same time, I really liked her dynamic with Lana. Like you said, they're not romantic rivals, but they're not buddies either. So there's definitely some fun tension there. And I just kind of wish we could have had an arc. That's all. Like if she had still met her end by the end of the first arc, maybe it wouldn't have been as, they wanted that pop of that first issue. I get it. But I just wanted more of that dynamic. That's all.
If you're a Lana fan or whatever, this is your moment. Like this whole Superwoman series is really about her.
I will say, I think it's probably only a matter of time before I spend more time with this series to examine it from the Lana perspective. But here we were just looking at it for the Lois, so I was able to get away with just the one issue. But yeah, it was an interesting start, and like I said, I mean mostly for that dynamic between Lois and Lana. On I think a much more interesting note for me personally, last but not least, we have Tales from the Dark Multiverse, Death of Superman one shot from 2019. Now, again, I'm in no way, shape, or form going to recap all the death metal stuff, but suffice it to say, we have this dark multiverse, and there was a series of one-shots that put a dark spin on classic DC Comics storylines, and one of them was Death of Superman. And so we have this alternate version of the Death of Superman where after he dies, Lois's grief really turns to vengeance. She lashes out at the other heroes. Like, why weren't you there? You let him die alone, right? She ends up at the fortress. She brings his cape there to sort of say goodbye for him. And she encounters the Eradicator, who laments the fact that he was too late, right? Even though he put Superman's body in the Matrix, he's not returned to life yet. He's not sure what's going on, but he has all of this power. And Lois volunteers to take the power. And so she becomes this superpowered version of herself. And very quickly goes to very extreme lengths, right, to cure the ills of the world. Like it very quickly turns from this grief over Clark's death and trying to honor him to this sense that he could and should have done more along the way, right? And so she's going to do that. She's going to put a permanent end to the problems that she foresees. And maybe, one of the most dramatic instances of that is when she confronts Lex Luthor II, right? Our original Lex in his own clone body with the Australian accent and the flowing red mane. And she flies him up into space and kills him. And she tells him before she does this that Clark Kent was Superman, right? And he's going on and on about how he owns the judges. Nothing will stop. He's confessing to all these crimes, right? Nothing will be able to stop him. And she kills him. This one was really, really interesting to me. My thanks to everyone who had recommended it to me at the time. I'm sorry I dragged my feet, but I really enjoyed this one. Now, what did you make of this?
This is a very dark multiverse. No joke. By the way, I'm rolling out the multiverse map or whatever as we go here. We're going to dive into the divine continuum
God.
and Perpetua. Oh my God. But no, it is interesting because it's like, that's the complaint of the death of Superman is like, where the hell were the other superheroes when all this was going down? Because we have his Justice League America team that he's been on for a very short time. And it's, Booster and Blue Beetle and Maxima and everything. And they're not the powerhouses that you usually have with the Justice League. So yeah, they get taken out very quickly or whatever. And he has to write, but it's like, yeah, where's Batman and all of them? They're there for the funeral, but like, they're just not there for that story, which is basically it's just the way comics work or whatever. But I like that they put that into this issue where she's like, what about where the hell were all you guys or whatever when this was going down? Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I think it's certainly a valid question for readers of the story, right? Like, well, where were the rest of the heroes of the DC universe? But in story as well, I mean, I think that's a valid gripe for her to have, that they weren't there to help him. And then, to your point about how they were there for the funeral, I mean, Lois addresses that in the book where she's like, yeah, they weren't there to help him, but there they are front and center in the funeral procession. Meanwhile, those who loved him, like me, can't even get a glimpse. So what I really liked about this was that, you see how, okay, if Superman doesn't return and if that grief kind of festers into something else, and really the inciting incident really is that lashing out at the other heroes over their failure to be there, which again, I think is kind of a reasonable axe to grind. You kind of see how Lois starts down this path and then again starts taking more and more extreme methods. I mean, she gets to the point she kills Batman because he'll never stop.
Yeah, I was like, I got to that page and I was like, wait, did she just? Oh shit, she killed Batman. And what it reminded me of is like, this Lois with the powers of the Eradicator, it's very like Jean Grey Dark Phoenix or whatever. It's like she has this immense amount of power. Jean wipes out a whole solar system, but that's a whole other story on the Marvel side. But like, yeah, she basically talks about like, this world didn't deserve you, Clark. I'm going to make a better world. But then it kind of flips and it's more like, why didn't you do more? Like, this is what we need to, this is what you should have been doing all along. And so then it gets to the point where, and it basically, what's interesting is it unfolds exactly the same as Death of Superman. It's still the Doomsday. It's still the fight. It's just this Lois in that moment chose a very different path than the Lois that did in the original, like the original Death of Superman.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's very much that intersection of grief and power, right? Like then she has this opportunity to take on this power and now has the ability to initially right these wrongs and then, really just continues down this path. Yeah. I think that's probably what's most compelling about it, to your point, is it's not like, oh man, they radically overhauled the events of the story. It's like, no. I mean, they follow, and then there's this point of departure, but you see how we get there. And then even past that point, the replacement Supermen show up, right? We have Steel, we have Superboy, and we have Cyborg. And then even Superman himself in his black regeneration suit shows up later than in the original Superman. He shows up. And I wanted to ask you, because I don't know if I don't know, maybe the art let me down a little bit here. I don't know. But my understanding of the climax of the story is that Cyborg has this Kryptonite blaster, not unlike what we would see at the climax of Reign of the Supermen. And that Lois destroys it, but it releases the cloud of kryptonite, and that's what kills Superman. Like, right? Like she's responsible for Superman's second death. Yeah.
Yeah, because he's back and he's like, it took me a little bit longer than we thought, like to get through the regeneration. And then in the meantime, they're fighting Cyborg Superman, and he seemingly kills anyway, Superboy and Steel. And then it's not super cool. I had to read it a few times because I was like, she basically just like flies at him with all her energy, and there's a big explosion, and then she's holding Clark's body again, but then she's ultimately responsible for like killing him the second time, not on purpose, but she takes out Cyborg, but then in the process takes out Superman himself, and the replacement Superman are all apparently dead too. So it's like, wow.
Yeah, it's dark. I mean, it lives up to its title. Well, audience, like I said, this wasn't meant to be exhaustive. So if there are other instances of Lois with powers that really stood out to you that you want to share, please reach out. Let us know. I'd be really curious to hear. But Chris, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, so happy to be here or whatever. I finally made it to the main show of Digging for Kryptonite. So.
Made it onto the main feed. Now, pleasure to have you. And thank you for all of your support over the years as well. Audience, thank you for tuning in as always. I truly appreciate it. Make sure you keep tuning in. And until then, as always, it's about what you do. It's about action. This podcast is an affiliate of BCW Supplies. The next time you need to restock on comic book bags, boards, boxes, and more, be sure to use promo code FSP to save 10% on your order. That's FSP for Flat Squirrel Productions. It helps support the show too. Thank you. By popular demand, Digging for Kryptonite merch is now available at our TeePublic store. Visit the link in the show notes to get your DFK shirts, hats, mugs, and more. Support the show and receive exclusive content, including the spin-off podcast Beyond Metropolis, by becoming a member at patreon.com/Anthony Desiato. My sincere thanks to all patrons. Please subscribe, rate, and review today via your platform of choice, and continue the conversation by joining us on social media. Flat Squirrel Podcast is also home to another exciting episode in the Adventures of Superman, now covering the color era of the classic George Reeves series. Subscribe today. Digging for Kryptonite is a Flat Squirrel production. Key art by Isaiah Simmons and theme music by Dan Pritchard.